I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm living my life. It was so lovely. But I'm just gonna say this, 10 years in, this made sense for my family. And not only that, but I just feel like it's just a privilege to do this.
For years, fans thought they knew why Cameron Diaz vanished from Hollywood. At the height of her fame, she was one of the most powerful actresses in the world. The movies were massive. She was one of the highest-paid actresses in the world. Her career seemed untouchable. Then she disappeared. Why would someone give up everything they had spent decades building? For nearly 10 years, Cameron stayed largely silent, allowing rumors to spread. Some claimed she was burned out. Others believed Hollywood had pushed her aside. But what was really going on behind the scenes was very different. Today, we're uncovering the real reason Cameron Diaz walked away from Hollywood, the hidden struggles she kept private for years, and the unexpected truth that finally explains her disappearance. The girl from San Diego who accidentally became a movie star. Cameron Diaz was born on August 30, 1972, in San Diego, California, and nothing about her early life pointed toward Hollywood stardom. Diaz grew up in a working-class household, attended public school, and started modeling as a teenager simply to make extra money. The modeling work took her around the world long before any acting role existed. Nobody around her was planning a film career. The whole thing happened almost by accident. In 1994, a casting team needed someone for a new comedy starring Jim Carrey. Diaz had never acted professionally in her life. She auditioned anyway and landed the female lead in The Mask. The film became a massive hit, and overnight, a 21-year-old model with zero acting training became a recognizable face in movie theaters across the country. Most actors spend years building toward a breakout role. Diaz started with one. The years that followed moved quickly. My Best Friend's Wedding in 1997 showed she could hold her own in a major studio comedy alongside Julia Roberts. There's Something About Mary in 1998 turned her into a true comedic star and earned her a Golden Globe nomination. Being John Malkovich in 1999 proved she could handle strange, layered material that most comedic actors would never attempt, earning a second Golden Globe nomination. Any Given Sunday, the same year, directed by Oliver Stone, showed real range in serious drama. By the early 2000s, Diaz was one of the most bankable actresses in the industry, leading the Charlie's Angels franchise in 2000 and its 2003 sequel, and voicing Princess Fiona in the Shrek movies starting in 2001, a role that introduced her to an entirely new generation of fans who had no idea she had ever done anything else. The Shrek franchise alone would go on to become one of the most successful animated film series in history. The career looked unstoppable. Box office numbers kept climbing. Studios kept calling. Nobody watching from the outside could have guessed how complicated things were starting to feel from the inside, or how much was quietly being sacrificed behind every premiere and every magazine cover. The signs that something needed to change had actually been building for years, long before anyone noticed. The skin problem that quietly changed her entire outlook on life. Long before any retirement headlines, Cameron Diaz was dealing with something most fans never connected to her later choices. As a teenager, Diaz struggled with severe cystic acne. In her own words, written years later in her wellness book, The Body Book, she described her diet at the time as nothing but greasy fast food, joking that if a person is what they eat, she was basically a burrito with extra cheese and extra sauce. The acne was bad enough that Diaz called it embarrassing in multiple interviews across the years. For someone who would later become famous partly for her looks, the experience left a lasting impression on the relationship between health, food, and the way a person feels inside their own body. It was not a small or passing teenage frustration. It shaped how Diaz thought about her own physical well-being for the rest of her life. Diaz eventually changed her entire diet, cutting out the fast food that had defined her eating habits as a teenager. The skin cleared, the energy improved, and something deeper shifted as well. Diaz became genuinely passionate about nutrition, fitness, and overall wellness years before that became a mainstream Hollywood trend that every other celebrity would eventually adopt. That passion did not disappear once the acne cleared up. Diaz continued dealing with skin sensitivity throughout her adult life, including documented struggles with psoriasis that dermatology sources noted publicly across multiple points in her career. The skin issues never fully went away, but the wellness mindset she had built in response to them only grew stronger with time. What very few people connected at the time was that Diaz was quietly building an entirely different identity underneath the movie star exterior. She was becoming someone deeply invested in physical well-being, someone who read about nutrition science for fun, someone who was already thinking about health as a full-time interest rather than a hobby squeezed in between film shoots. That interest would later become one of the most important threads explaining why she eventually walked away from acting completely. While the wellness interest was developing quietly, the demands of being a top-tier movie star were becoming harder and harder to manage. What being a movie star actually cost her. In 2013, The Hollywood Reporter named Cameron Diaz the highest-paid female actor over the age of 40 working in the industry. By any traditional measure, she had reached the absolute peak of professional success. Decades of work, dozens of films, and a level of box office trust that very few actresses in her age bracket ever achieve. Diaz later described what that peak actually felt like from the inside, and the picture was far less glamorous than the headline suggested. Speaking with Gwyneth Paltrow during an interview for Goop, Diaz explained that being the actor, being the talent, being the person delivering the performance meant every other part of her life had to be handed off to someone else. Her schedule, her time, her daily decisions, all of it is managed by other people because the job demands total focus on one single thing. Diaz described filming a movie in blunt terms. Production owns the actor completely. 12-hour days for months at a time, with no real space left over for anything resembling a normal life. She went further, describing actors as being infantilized by the system, treated almost like children who simply show up where they are told and do what they are told. That description is striking, coming from one of the most powerful actresses in the business. It reveals something many fans never consider. Fame and success do not automatically come with control. Often, the opposite is true. The bigger the career, the less personal freedom is left over. Diaz later told Kevin Hart on his talk show Heart to Heart that she eventually realized, around the time she turned 40, that huge sections of her life were being completely unmanaged. Not because she did not care, but because there was simply no time or energy left after giving everything to her career. She described it directly. There were so many parts of her life that she was not touching, parts she was not managing, and could not really manage, because everything around her had become too massive to control on her own. That breaking point led to a decision most people in Hollywood are terrified to make. The moment she chose herself over her career. In 2014, Cameron Diaz appeared in the movie musical Annie, playing Miss Hannigan. At the time, nobody knew it would be her final film role for an entire decade. The film was a modern retelling of the classic story, And Diaz delivered the kind of sharp comedic performance audiences had come to expect from her across 20 years of work. Diaz did not announce a dramatic retirement immediately. The shift happened quietly. She simply stopped accepting new film roles. Public appearances became rare. Years passed before she gave a clear, direct explanation for what had happened. In 2018, Diaz finally confirmed publicly that she had retired from acting. The confirmation came without bitterness or drama. She described the choice using language that focused entirely on personal well-being rather than industry politics or any falling out with Hollywood. Speaking to CBS News, Diaz explained the decision as a chance to step back and genuinely examine her whole life. She wanted to look at what she could do better and find ways to feel more complete as a person, rather than only existing as the talent everyone depended on professionally. At the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit, Diaz used even stronger language. She described the decision as something she had to do to reclaim her own life. She added that no opinion, no offer, and no measure of success could have changed her mind once she made that decision. Nobody's opinion, she said. Nobody's success. No one's offer. Nothing could have shifted her resolve once it had formed. That kind of certainty is rare in an industry built on constant validation, awards, and public approval. Diaz was openly saying that none of that mattered enough to keep her in a career that had taken over every part of her existence. This was not a woman running from failure. This was someone walking away from massive success because the cost to her personal life had become too high to justify continuing. What she built next reveals the real reason this decision made so much sense. The life she built that nobody expected. After leaving acting, Cameron Diaz did not disappear into total privacy. She redirected her energy into a completely different kind of life, one she had quietly been preparing for without most fans realizing it. In January 2015, Diaz married Benji Madden, former frontman of the band Good Charlotte. The wedding was small, private, and intentionally kept away from typical Hollywood spectacle, a clear signal of the lower-profile life Diaz wanted going forward. Friends and family described the ceremony as intimate, a sharp contrast to the kind of large-scale celebrity weddings that typically follow a career at Diaz's level. In January 2020, Diaz and Madden welcomed their daughter, Radix. Diaz later described motherhood as the most fulfilling experience of her entire life, explaining in one interview that, for the better part of a year, becoming a mother had simply been the best phase of her life, with all of her energy finally going somewhere meaningful and lasting. That same year, Diaz launched a wine brand called Avaline alongside business partner Catherine Power. The brand focused specifically on clean, lower intervention on wine, directly connected to the same wellness philosophy Diaz had been developing since her teenage years, fighting acne through better nutrition. Avaline grew into a genuine retail success, sold in stores and through online platforms, built entirely on the philosophy that what people consume should be simple, honest, and free of unnecessary additives. This detail matters far more than most retrospectives ever acknowledge. Diaz was not randomly starting a wine company because retired celebrities often do that. She was building a business rooted in the exact health philosophy she had been quietly developing for over 20 years, long before she ever stepped away from acting. The wellness interest that started with teenage acne had grown into wellness writing through her 2013 book, The Body Book, then matured further into an actual business built on the same values. Acting had been the job that paid the bills. Wellness had always been the deeper personal passion running underneath it. Diaz simply finally had the time and the freedom to focus fully on the things she had cared about all along. That focus on personal well-being is also the real explanation behind something most coverage of her story completely missed. For years, Cameron Diaz's departure from acting was viewed as a simple retirement story. A successful actress steps away from Hollywood, chooses a quieter life, and moves on. But that explanation leaves out a much bigger part of the picture. The real story is not about an actress who suddenly quit. It is about a passion that had been growing quietly in the background for more than 20 years. Long before she left Hollywood, Diaz was deeply interested in health and wellness. As a teenager, she began changing her diet to deal with painful skin issues, and that experience sparked a lifelong fascination with how the body works. While building one of the biggest careers in Hollywood, she was also developing a second identity centered on wellness. Years before stepping away from acting, she had already written a book focused on health, showing that this new path was not a sudden decision, but something she had been building toward for decades. She was already thinking like a wellness entrepreneur long before she ever stepped away from movie sets. Acting did not get replaced by nothing. It got replaced by something Diaz had already been building quietly for 2 decades. The wine brand was not a random new hobby. It was the natural next chapter of an identity that had existed underneath the movie star persona the entire time, waiting patiently for the schedule and the energy to finally make room for it. This explains why Diaz has consistently said she does not miss performing, while never expressing any regret or bitterness about the industry itself. She was not escaping something she hated. She was finally arriving somewhere she had been heading toward for years, a destination that had nothing to do with cameras or scripts, and everything to do with managing her own body, her own time, and her own daily choices. It also explains her eventual return. In 2024, Diaz agreed to star opposite Jamie Foxx in the Netflix film Back in Action, encouraged partly through a phone call involving Foxx and football legend Tom Brady, who Foxx jokingly called an expert on unretiring. Diaz herself credited her husband Benji Madden with encouraging the comeback as well, describing herself as ready and nervous, but mostly excited to step back in front of a camera after a decade away. The return was not a sign that retirement had failed. It was simply evidence that Diaz now had enough personal balance and security to choose acting again on her own terms rather than being owned by it. That distinction, choosing versus being owned, is the entire heart of everything Cameron Diaz has said about her career since 2014, and it explains why she has never once sounded bitter about the industry that made her famous. The unexpected reason she left it all behind. Cameron Diaz built one of the most successful film careers of her generation. She also walked away at the absolute peak of that success, something almost nobody at that level of fame ever chooses to do voluntarily. Most actors hold on for as long as the industry will have them, chasing one more role, one more paycheck, one more chance at relevance. Diaz did the opposite while still very much in demand. Her explanation across multiple interviews has remained remarkably consistent. The fame was overwhelming. The schedule consumed every part of her life. Other people managed pieces of her existence that she desperately wanted to manage herself. By the time she turned 40, entire sections of her personal life had been quietly neglected for nearly 2 decades. Rather than accepting that as simply the cost of success, Diaz made the unusual choice to walk away and rebuild her life around health, family, and a business rooted in genuine personal passion rather than industry expectation. She told InStyle magazine that she had given more than half of her life to the public by that point, and that she felt it was finally acceptable to take time for herself and choose how she wanted to return to the world, if she ever chose to return at all. The skin struggles of her teenage years, something most fans never even think about, turn out to be one of the most important keys to understanding everything that followed. The wellness identity she built quietly across 2 decades did not disappear when her acting career ended. It simply finally had room to fully exist, unburdened by 12-hour filming days and press tours that left no space for anything else. Diaz's return to acting in 2024 does not contradict any of this. It confirms it. She came back only once she had built a life stable and balanced enough to make that choice freely, rather than out of obligation or financial necessity. The decision to unretire was made on her terms, at her pace, for a project she genuinely wanted to do. Cameron Diaz did not abandon Hollywood. She outgrew the version of herself that needed it to feel complete, then returned only when stepping back into that world meant something completely different than it once did. That is the real reason she left, and it is also the real reason she eventually came back. Cameron Diaz spent 20 years quietly becoming someone the cameras never fully captured, then walked away from Hollywood right when the world expected her to want it most. Her comeback only proves how much she finally got right. Returning not because retirement failed, but because life had finally caught up to a place where acting could exist as a choice rather than a requirement. Drop a comment on what surprised you most about this story. Like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the choices celebrities rarely explain fully.